Hello, everyone. Thanks for giving us your time today. I'm Ian Hamilton in New York, joined by David Heaney across the Atlantic Ocean over there in London for our episode of VR Download today. Thank you so much for giving us your time. It has been kind of a weird week. A lot of little things, I think, being put in place for the future, as well as what David just came in here and published right before we came live, was that Apple Pencil announcement. David, what do we have this week?
Yeah, this week we're not going to have a full length episode. This will probably be shorter. We're aiming for 30 to 45 minutes, so it's very possible that will push on to an hour. We're going to talk firstly about the Steam hardware survey and the fact that Quest 3 is now neck and neck with Valve Index. So we're seeing from the stats, it looks clear that Index owners are finally starting to upgrade their headset, one of the longest lasting headsets there, the Index. We'll then talk about Tim Cook's statement that most Fortune 100 companies, not countries, are already using Apple Vision Pro. So Apple Vision Pro having a big focus on the enterprise market, whereas most analysis is focused on the consumer market. We'll then talk about the article we just published, which comes after Apple's event today. Apple had an event that they announced the new iPads in, but they also announced an Apple Pencil Pro. And our article is just talking about how this would be a perfect accessory for Apple Vision Pro. We saw a previous report claiming Apple was testing this, and we believe there's a good chance that this might happen at WWDC this year. So we're going to speculate a little about how that could be the controller for Vision Pro. Finally, we will talk about the report that suggests that a cheaper and lighter Apple headset, a non-Pro Vision headset, could launch as early as June 2024. So we could be only 13 months away from a cheaper and lighter Apple headset, according to that report. And we'll add the relevant caveats and context there. Hello to Ryan B. Hello to Anti-Cleric. Hello to Mark Seymour, Themeco, Show Games, Jason Rains, Ashley Guy Godin, the developer of Virtual Desktop, Lord Beavis, Onakazi, Headset Historian, Greg Snell, lots of people in the comments. Yeah, we're still doing this show. We're very busy with a lot of other things. We have an interesting website related announcement tomorrow. We're not going to go into detail about that, but keep an eye on our website tomorrow for an UploadVR related announcement tomorrow that we're currently working on in the background.
Yeah, I saw someone in our comments talking about my tangents and how I can go off on various tangents at a moment's notice. And I want to apologize for that, at the same time sort of explain that it's rather difficult to jump between platforms the way I think we all have in these last little bit. Right before I came into this studio, I was in a WebXR experience here on the MetaQuest, and for some reason, the audio carried over even into the studio here. So I was in this studio here exactly with David, and there was still music playing for some background audio reason from the WebXR experience on this browser, on this headset I was trying at this moment. And that same WebXR experience I was trying in Apple Vision Pro, separate, right before this. And it's really weird to be like, okay, I've got a keyboard here in front of me for one headset, and then you've got to go to another headset with the same content experience, and it won't connect to the same keyboard right next to you. And that's what it's been like these days. And it's funny, David, like as I'm playing with Apple Vision Pro and doing it in this way that I'm describing, you as a developer have been required to leap in and out of Quest headsets more quickly than any other user of the headset imaginable, right? Like, you have to have a really good sense of just how much time it takes to develop on the headset. Did you ever get that hack where you can actually install the headset on a mount on your desk and just hold it up to your headset, or did you stop short of that?
So what a lot of developers tend to do is get one of the flip-up head straps. So obviously one of the great things about Quest is that there's many third-party head straps. And one of the best ones allows you to kind of flip it up so that you can easily go from being on your PC to being in the headset. That seems to be very, very popular with developers. When it comes to keyboards, that's why I really like the Logitech MX keys. It has a 1, 2, and 3 button at the top right that lets you easily switch between devices. So device 1 is my PC, device 2 is my Quest, and device 3 is my Vision Pro. So I can actually really quickly change keyboard context. On your tangents, we have Arlen Condert in the comment saying that they love your tangents, Ian. Don't stop doing them. They seem to be very divisive, but some people love them, some people hate them. I
Yeah.
think that's going to be the case for a lot of things. You can't please everyone all the time, is the classic cliche.
Yeah, fair. And I was noticing Blair out there commenting that we won't start on time. I don't know. It's like there's a related issue there where, VR empowers us to almost literally just put on the device and we pop in front of you guys, our audience. And there's always technical layers behind that appearance that our viewers don't see, that we only experience most of the time. There was one experience where I popped into a black void where I could see my hands just like this, but nothing else existed. And I'm like and David could hear me. So I'm like talking to him from a universe as just one of Zuckerberg's avatars and nothing else. And that's how we're communicating during that situation. It's been crazy, some of the situations we've had.
Yeah, I think a lot less these days. To be clear, the main issue is just that we're a tiny team and that we are doing multiple things at once, right? This is a side project for us. We love coming to talk to you, but our job is to write articles for the UploadVR website. And if that has to be done, sometimes we can't be in here on time, okay? We would love to have enough staff to constantly be able to man everything we want to do. We just don't have that. It's just the sad reality of the world that sometimes you have to harshly prioritize. And if that means a 5 or 10 minute late show, it's really not the end of the world, as much as we do endeavor to be on time. But yeah, do you want to get into the first topic then? The first thing I want to point out is just, apparently I misspoke in the intro and said June 2024 for the cheaper and lighter Apple headset. I did say 13 months later after that. So I think it's quite clear by the context I meant June 2025. But we'll talk about that when we come to that subject. Let's start by talking about the Steam hardware survey, though, because it's a very interesting one this month where we see Quest 3 is now neck and neck with the Valve Index after a very, very long time of Index being number 2. Index is still number 2, to be clear, but Quest 3 is now within essentially margin of error. It's within, 0.5%. And when Quest 3 first launched, Index was way into the 20s, way into the 20%, and it's actually been decreasing and decreasing over time as Quest 3 has been surging. You've also seen a few other smaller headsets come into play. For example, the Big Screen Beyond. We've also seen some growth in Pico 4 that's brought it, well beyond the original Quest and getting into the territory of the original Rift. But the main trend we've seen since the Quest 3 launch is the reduction of Index's share and an associated increase in Quest 3s. And what that suggests, based on the data, is that Index owners are finally starting to upgrade. We're getting close to the 5th anniversary of the Valve Index, right? In June, it's going to be the 5th anniversary. That's a remarkable staying power for the Index, and it's a testament both to its quality and to Valve's brand loyalty. Because if you look at the Rift S, which is now only at 7.5%, it launched at the same time as Valve Index within a month, right? Within 4 weeks. And yet, while Rift S was initially double Index, and for years it was double Index, today Index is double Rift S. So that is like a 4 times change in their relative positions. So what you saw was the Rift S was something that people got a lot at the time in 2019. They used a lot in 2019 and 2020 and even into 2021, but it didn't stand the test of time the same way as Index. People upgraded their Rift S to a Quest 2, to a Quest 3, maybe some to an Index, or maybe some to some of these other headsets, whereas they kept using their Index. And obviously the Index still today offers best-in-class audio. It still offers a great field of view. It still offers really good tracking quality if your base stations are set up right. But its resolution is very much so outdated today. It's the resolution of Valve Index is low today, and yet it's still sold at the same $1,000 price for a full kit. So in this new era where we have, a $500 Quest 3 that has 2K screens. The Index is still on like a 1.5K screen at $1,000, and that's why people have started to upgrade. Big Screen Beyond is definitely one of them. That's a headset people are upgrading to, but in much smaller numbers than Quest 3. A lot of people, I think, have been waiting for a Valve headset for a very long time, hoping that Valve was going to release something else. But in the absence of that, many are jumping to Quest 3. And it's not like Quest 3 is superior in every single way, right? There are certainly ways in which the Index is superior, but if you look at the overall specs and compare them, as we did in our article here, you can see that with the Quest 3, for half the price, you're getting, wireless built in with Wi-Fi 6E, pancake lenses, a lot higher resolution while still having almost the same refresh rate, inside-out tracking, hand tracking that you can use with various tools in VR chat and in other applications, and built-in upper body tracking, so that you can, for example, just put 2 Vive Ultimate trackers on your legs and get full body tracking. And when you put this all in this totality, when it comes to the price and the fact that this is also a standalone headset that you can use without a PC, it just seems that the quality bar is there as people wait for Valve.
Is it possible for you to reset the image or something? I think I've got an old image here up on the display. I don't think it's the right image. But
sure,
even
I think
not,
the audience can see it. But
I wanted to talk about the chart a little bit because what I want to go back to the chart being sort of a history lesson, and it's really funny to see kind of the different platforms that they were abandoned. You've got Rift to Rift S, and what's interesting is the market that Meta Facebook was able to achieve just simply by like lowering the price, the entry price, with inside out tracking in PC form factor. Like, it's clear that Rift S is still very high, right? It's when we talk about staying power, it's remarkable that Rift S is even staying that strong. And it's kind of funny how strong Oculus Rift is as well, going back to 2016. Those are pretty remarkable that it's still outperforming standalone headsets today. Like those are people still booting those things up month after month and connecting them to their machines.
Well, yeah, it's outperforming the Pico 4 and the original Quest, but Pico 4 it's not sold in North America, which is the primary market for this kind of VR right now. And the original Quest has obviously been fast deprecated on the standalone space. You can still use virtual desktop on the original Quest. You can still use AirLink. You can't use Steam Link because Valve didn't decide to support the original Quest. But I think a lot of people likely sold their original Quest to probably more casual users, or just kind of put it in a box as they got Quest 2. There was a very quick deprecation of that. But yeah, you're right to say it's fascinating that the original Rift and Vive are still being used, together on the order of 10%. That is interesting, but you do see the vast majority still, we have to keep pointing out, are on Quest 2.
Well, we're not going to discuss the Beat Saber news. That wasn't one of our topics, but I wanted to briefly mention it in context of like this platform evolution. I made this joking note kind of in my article that later this year, original Quest owners who play Beat Saber can only play it through PC from November. So like this 1% of people that still use the original Oculus Quest to play Beat Saber on this chart, they're still going to be able to play multiplayer Beat Saber from November, even though the original Quest headset. What gets me is like that, Beat Saber was born on Steam, right? So that was the birth of this platform. Was born in an early access program on Steam, and then very quickly became famous on standalone, kind of going back to only being the fully featured version of the service. It's kind of an interesting note to make about the whole full circle evolution we've seen over the last couple of years of what Meta has done in this space.
Yeah, you're right. If you have a PC, right, you are able to extend the life of any standalone headset much further. There will be a time when Quest is essentially obsolete as a standalone headset. We're not quite there. There's still things you can do on a Quest as a standalone headset, but one day almost every app will have dropped support for it, but you'll still be able to boot up Virtual Desktop from Guy Godin, who's in our comments, and play that. We have an interesting question from one of our commenters asking, has there been a decline in the Lighthouse tracking system's usage over time on Steam? We don't have a fully updated chart on that. This is from a few months ago, but we do have a chart that actually does show this. You can see here, this was a few months ago to be clear, but even as a few months ago, over 70% of headsets used on Steam VR were using inside-out SLAM tracking, whereas only around a quarter were using Steam VR Lighthouse tracking. And then you have that small other, which is the original Oculus Rift's outside-in camera system, and the PlayStation VR that people use through third-party webcam drivers. So this is something we expect to change over time. Even more so, I would be really shocked if Valve's next headset, if it does arrive, if they do ship a headset. We know they're working on one. It's just a question of, will they actually decide to ship that as a product? If they do, will it use inside-out tracking? I would be shocked if it didn't. I don't think that Valve wants to require $300 of base stations using a mechanical hard drive motor to operate its headset. Is it possible that it'll have the ability to use it? Maybe, but it just seems like dead cost and weight when you consider what's possible now, right? Like the Quest Pro controllers have shown what you can do with inside-out tracking. You can give a headset really great high quality inside-out tracking and the controllers themselves. Then you have no base stations, and yet you have full range of motion for both the headset and the controllers. And we're at the point where, computer vision and these standalone chipsets have advanced to the point where this is a debatable thing. But to me, I think there is no difference. I don't see a lower quality of headset tracking when I'm in a Quest 3 than in a Steam VR tracked headset. It just isn't a thing anymore. I'm not going to deny maybe in the original Quest and the original Rift S, maybe at that point there were differences, but by now it's just not something that anyone is going to notice anymore.
Yeah, I think there's an argument to be made that Lighthouse was outdated the day it shipped. Like it was like the idea of shipping mechanical spinning lasers in the millions upon millions didn't seem like it was gonna, like it encountered scaling issues almost instantly, right? With like individual parts becoming constrained at different moments. Right. There's a reason why you ship things with fewer mechanical parts in them. It's like there's a reason why it wins out. And I remember being at the Valve Index launch, and I remember them that was the one occasion where they showed off the layering of the computer vision, where you could sort of layer the world around you and see the computer vision showing you the surroundings in various ways. And then of course Facebook did the same thing at one of the Connect events, where they had you like layer the environment in very psychedelic sort of ways. And I've heard Jerry Ellsworth talk about this being a problem going back a decade plus, where people actually don't like the feeling too much of seeing their environment with CGI overlays. Like it has an otherworldly effect that can actually be pretty jarring, I think, if you spend too much time in it. And that's why we've ended up going full circle back to these like past reviews that really try to recreate our view as realistically as they can. But all of this to say that what is the open source path to that for Valve? Like Valve has made a pretty big claim that outside of logging into your Steam account, they're pretty open about everything about their ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, it would be interesting to see Valve release a computer vision based tracking system that was open, right? Imagine any headset maker, instead of having to use base stations, could just load some drivers and add a configuration for their exact camera positions and extrinsics, the lens properties, and then have inside out tracking out of the box as long as they're on Steam VR. That's a huge potential Valve could definitely go for. I'm not sure if I'd say Lighthouse was outdated at launch. I do think within a year or two it was. And by the time the Index launched, it was definitely not the best solution for the future, right? One of the reasons the Index costs what it does and it hasn't come down is those moving parts and mechanical motors that are now, more rare than ever. We're in an era of solid state drives, not hard drives anymore. So the scale of that just isn't quite there, other than for enterprise. Yeah, but it'll be very interesting to see where they go. Looking at the comments here, um, some people are saying that they find Apple Vision Pro to match Lighthouse precision tightness in tracking. And they say Quest 3 is very, very close. We have other people saying they don't see any difference at all between Quest 3 and Lighthouse tracking. But yeah, it's clear here that the future is computer vision, right? Valve is going to want a solution that allows them to have hand tracking, that allows them to have mixed reality, room meshing. None of that is really served by base stations. And especially now that we're in the era of, HTC Vive Ultimate trackers that you can strap to your body, inside out upper body tracking. We're in a different era today than we were back then. And the original promise of the Lighthouse tracking system was that it would be low cost. A lot of people don't remember this, but when Valve was talking it up about a year before the launch of the Rift, one of the promises was that eventually this would be like USB, and you would be able to, make a base station for almost the cost of a light bulb, and that they would be there in cafes, and that they would be there in libraries, and that this would just be, $20 base stations and, almost no cost to add tracking to a device. In reality, the opposite happened, right? The price went up over time. The complexity of building a Steam VR track device went up as they went to Steam VR tracking 2.0. It's a unfortunate path that it went that way, but thankfully, in a way, computer vision came along and rapidly advanced. Nobody thought back at the launch of the original Rift and Vive that computer vision would be where it is today, in terms of the fact that you can, on an incredibly low cost device, have incredibly high precision inside out tracking of a headset and controllers, and then do all these other things like hand tracking and segmentation and mixed reality, room meshing. But it has happened, and we're in that era.
Yeah, and of course, right, people sort of forget that Valve had a tracking system before the Lighthouse base stations, right? They were tracking QR codes in the room for a very long time, and like that's pretty standard open source functionality to begin with, right? Like, so there is a basis there for people to build on. It's just like I've been waiting for why haven't the PlayStation numbers gone up on the survey with people doing that, right? Like using a webcam to provide 6DoF link up to, to their PlayStation headset through some kind of open source system. You would think more people would end up doing that when the tools get easier to use.
I mean, if you mean the original PlayStation VR, it's a very low resolution headset, right? It's lower resolution than the original Rift and Vive. Yes, it does have RGB subpixels, whereas they're pentile, but it is a dinosaur by today's age. The tracking quality you get there is still not great. I don't know if it has full sensor fusion. I think they maybe do a little bit of sensor fusion, but it's not really high quality. Also, controller tracking, right? Those PlayStation Move controllers, you just intrinsically you
don't remind me
track
them. Don't. Yeah. Let's not talk about those again.
It's almost a nightmare level to remember that's what people had to go through. We talk about PlayStation VR 2 and its shortcomings in the market, but we forget just how much of a massive improvement it is over the original PlayStation VR, which was essentially made of like old parts when you think about it. The PS Move controllers launched well over a decade ago, or like almost 15 years ago.
Well, like similar, I mean, like, so Valve supports skeletal input, right? Like that's a Valve system that they've had in there for years now, right? They launched it, I think, right around the time of Alex, somewhere around that period, and that's what people are using right now via open source computer vision on other systems, right? Like we still have yet to see what open source computer vision really does for VR, what Valve branded or Steam branded computer vision does. But like right now, people are using hand tracking. I think Guy Godin, right, is already using what meta hand tracking to jerry rig people into Steam in this backwards way, right?
Yeah, and with applications that do support that Steam VR skeletal slash skeletal, whatever you want to say, tracking, you can actually put that directly through to the hand model, like in Half-Life Alyx. I mean, that's what you're doing in Vision Pro, right? You're
Yeah.
sending through its hand tracking through ALVR, that open source tool, directly into that skeletal hand tracking. I think, unless you have anything else to add, we'll just finish up this section by just noting the velocity of Quest 3 over time that's got it to neck and neck now. So it launched in mid-October, as everyone knows. By November, it was already the fifth most used headset on Steam. In December, it surpassed the HTC Vive to become the fourth, and in January, it surpassed Oculus Rift S to become the third. So since then, it has significantly slowed down in velocity. That launch season of people getting their Quest 3s around the holiday season obviously was the biggest sales period by far, but that's really, really slowed down. But it's still realistically going to take over the index either this summer or later in the year when we see some of those AAA games start coming to Quest 3 and bringing in more people.
Yeah, it's really easy to imagine Quest 3 at the top of this very soon, and that is what leads to us wondering where is the Valve headset? And I think we get this question a lot. I'm starting to get this picture, David, of a very low profile device compared to the Index. Right? Like I don't know that you've got a battery would be the biggest thing that a Valve headset would need to contain, just like just like a Quest headset has a battery it needs to contain. If you're just beaming everything from your nearby PC to a headset, we've talked about this. Do we think Valve is actually going to do that? This profile device that wirelessly streams from your PC?
I think this is a much wider discussion, but
Yeah.
yeah, to touch on it, I do think that looks like that's what Valve is planning. We've talked about this before, where you could run 2D applications on the headset. The headset itself is doing hand tracking, head tracking, controller tracking, mixed reality, but the actual high performance rendering is happening on a PC. It's not designed to run, the likes of Asgard's Wrath 2 on the headset. It's designed to stream the likes of Half-Life Alyx from your PC. It makes sense for Valve. Valve is the one company that's incentivized to care about PC VR because they get the 30% cut on all of the Steam sales. On any game you buy on Steam, Valve is getting 30% of that money. So they want you using your PC. Hosting a separate platform from Steam, a Steam mobile, this would have to be for, completely heavily optimized apps, would be a nightmare for Valve. It just would not make sense. Um, yeah, so Reduced Gravity says something. Watching his hands jitter makes me wonder how they can say Quest is just as good as tracking at Lighthouse. This is controller-free hand tracking. We're not holding controllers right now. If I look around the room, I think I can probably find my controllers and turn them on for you here. Once I have controllers on, you can see that this hand tracking, there's no jitter on these controllers. These controllers are tracking perfectly. We're also, right now, I'm using a Quest 2 rather than a Quest 3. So I'm not even on the latest headset. I'm on the headset that is currently selling for $200. It's essentially the bargain bin headset these days. It's 4 years old, nearly. And I'm not in an ideal lighting environment. Ian is on a Quest Pro, I believe, but he may be on a Quest 3. And also not in ideal lighting. It's also probably tracking his hands on the side cameras when they're down below, not on the primary cameras. So, this is not the same thing as talking about Lighthouse tracking. A Lighthouse base station cannot track your fingers without you holding a controller. This is just completely not the same thing.
And then, of course, wait. So you were talking about you've also got the Index controllers that have the extra grip sensors that really help fill out your whole hand, right?
Sure, but it's not your whole hand. It's like
Yeah.
it's a partial. It's finger detection, right? It's not really the same kind of like fully articulated finger tracking we have right now. You can't do sign language with Index controllers. As you've covered, people have made a limited form of sign language you can use, but it's not like this. I can do any sign language with this essentially. There are some limitations where when you're covering certain fingers, there are certain sign language gestures that aren't possible, but the vast majority is doable, especially when it comes to something like the Quest 3, which has higher tracking quality than right now. Yeah, so are we ready to move on to the next topic?
Let's get into it.
Yeah, so the next topic here is just a comment from Tim Cook. And Apple had their earnings call recently, last week, and Cook confirmed that most Fortune 100 companies are already using Apple Vision Pro. So more than 50% of the top 100 US companies have bought at least one Apple Vision Pro already. And this includes, these aren't just Fortune 100 companies, the large enterprises from all over the world that are using the Vision Pro already includes KLM, Royal Dutch Airlines, SAP, Porsche, Lowe's, ENBW, and more. And so we have a quote here from the KLM's Vice President of Operations Decision Support, who says, we see Apple Vision Pro as a tremendous value add that will improve our fleet availability and operations. Training our employees with spatial computing will lead to fewer costly errors because the most current information they need to do their job is there in front of them as they perform the task. And in February, Porsche broke the Laguna Seca record for a series electric car with its new Taycan Turbo GT, while the engineers were tracking along using Vision Pro. So already, even though this is only a 3-month-old headset, big companies are already starting to see how this works for them. And VR is being used by big companies for training and visualization and planning and collaboration for years now. It's one of the things that HTC does really well by focusing their sales and operations on these companies. People still say, how the hell is HTC still in this market? The answer is they're mostly not focusing on consumers anymore. They're focusing on being the most convenient and best for developers, for enterprise developers, not just from a hardware perspective, but from all of the kind of other secondary business considerations that businesses care about. And so with the Vision Pro, now companies are getting a headset that has near 4K per eye resolution and is in a sort of semi-standalone form factor. All you have to do is hold a battery or put it in your pocket, and you can bring over some of your existing iPad apps very easily. You can extend those existing iPad apps into a spatial context and do things like pull out 3D models and integrate with all of the Apple services they already use with iPads. iPads are massively used in all these companies already. And this is essentially just like a sidestep from that. But what really interests me about this is some people responded by saying, this isn't big news. Of course, any big company would want to buy one of these and try it out. But what interests me is that they aren't just buying this out and using the built-in software or using some off-the-shelf software. A lot of these big companies are already building their own custom Vision OS apps to see how that works in their workflow. And companies like Porsche are already using it now, as is KLM. And I think this could be a real problem for Magic Leap 2 and for Microsoft HoloLens, and somewhat for Vario as well.
So imagine you've got, gosh, I can't even imagine how to describe. So this is a completely hypothetical scenario, but imagine you've got like a world-class designer who designs $100,000 type, whatever it is, a venue, a vehicle, a building. All right, they sit at their workstation with a 4K or 1080p monitor or 1440p monitor, maybe a couple of them on the side, and they've got a lot of drafting paper in front of them, and they design really expensive devices, and they have to get those things that they design to someone else on another continent. Like either it's a manufacturing facility or it's like an approval committee of people who are actually funding you to build your object. And like it is absolutely easier for you to put a headset on that person on the other continent and then have a headset on here and say, okay, here, let me walk you through these designs here. And you've got the whole thing right in front of you. You extend it out. I put out this call. I've asked a couple of people about Archeo, about Gravity Sketch, these apps that are out there doing big amounts of 3D design inside of VR. You've got Quill as well and Medium. I think both have connections to Adobe at this point, right? It's coming, right? Like this wave of building stuff in VR has been held up, and I would argue it's probably been held up by this standalone push over the last few years.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways it's held up by the standalone push. In other ways, it's held up by the fact that the standalone headsets weren't powerful enough for these kind of use cases. So you would either have to have someone tethered to this expensive gaming PC that you would have to either ship out to their home if this is a freelance designer or a work from home person, or you have to then upgrade your workstations in your office to support this kind of thing. Bring in headsets, tether them in. For a lot of these collaborative use cases, especially if it's just someone who isn't involved in the design process but just needs to sort of check off on it, like a manager, being able to just have this standalone headset in their home that they just boot up and put on and launch an app and they're in. That's a massive difference. I think that's why Vision Pro could be the enterprise headset of choice, because it's a bridge in some ways. You get the most powerful standalone headset ever with the M2 chip that's just about good enough to do some of these 3D collaboration tools, while still obviously being within a reasonable form factor. And for an enterprise company, $3,500 doesn't matter. If it provides them with utility, that's nothing to them. They spend that kind of money on everything and anything if it's something that improves productivity. Whereas we're talking about from the consumer market, we've said many times, $3,500 is an almost absurd price. There are people in our comments who frequently say, why are you talking about this headset? It's $3,500. It's dead. Nobody cares about it. And right now that's true in the sense that only wealthy early adopters can afford this thing. But for an enterprise, it's perfect. And you're right to say that the other problem, the biggest problem from Vision Pro, to just go on a slight tangent here, is the input method. You're talking about some of these 3D creativity applications. And Vision Pro right now, with its just hand and eye tracking, is simply clearly not designed for that.
Oh
It's
yeah.
something that Sony is going to go after, right? We saw Sony announce a headset back in January that's going to have these very specific controllers that are designed not for gaming, but designed specifically for content creation, for 3D spatial content creation, 3D drawing, simulation, um, animation. And that's what Vision Pro is really missing. There's no way that without those track controllers, Vision Pro is going to be able to support these kind of use cases. So that brings us on to our next story, which we'll kind of link into this, is that today what Apple announced for iPads, and to be clear, only for iPads, not Vision Pro, was the Apple Pencil Pro. And so this is a very interesting device because for only $130, I'll be clear in a moment why I'm saying that, this adds a lot more features than the previous pencils and makes it a really kind of different device. It's not just a stylus anymore. It's almost a full-fledged controller now. So the existing second generation Apple Pencil has a pressure sensor and double tap detection. So you essentially can draw on a 2D surface and double tap to have some sort of interactivity. But this new Pro also adds a gyroscope, so you have rotation, a squeeze sensor, so you can squeeze and you essentially get a trigger, and haptic feedback. And so that means that you could use this for 3D creativity, right? Because in free space, you squeeze it and you basically get a trigger input that developers can use to draw in 3D space while you're getting haptic feedback. And so this would be perfect for Vision Pro. And we think it's very possible that at WWDC 24 in June, Apple may just announce this or tease this. It's been rumored. We've heard Mac rumors cite a source familiar with the matter, the classic term, saying that Apple is testing this internally. If it doesn't happen this year, I think it's going to happen next year because it just makes so much sense. And without this, Vision Pro cannot be a serious platform for professional 3D creativity.
Yeah, so I failed to convince you of this right while we were chatting about this in Slack earlier today, but I'm gonna try to convince our audience of this because I was tempted to set this up right before I came in here. Over on the Quest here, there's the Pencil Plus or Pencil app with an exclamation mark. It just won a Quest Hackathon award for its innovation. And what you do is you put your Quest controller down on the top of a piece of paper to sync the location of the piece of paper to the location of the controller at that moment. And then you can start tracing an outline of something and learn to draw that way. Well, what I was wondering is if you could take the current Apple Pencil and do this with an iPad, if you could sync up the location of the iPad to the location of the touch controller, and then just learn to draw on an iPad. But at the end of that, you're using a Quest to draw on an iPad. At the end of that, you've got a digital artwork that you could then share automatically. Now you could also depend on the computer vision to see what you've drawn and cut it out for you, which I think is what some of Apple's features shown today do. But it is kind of funny that we've got a full loop here of training yourself on a number 2 pencil, like the same pencil you find around, and you could just draw that on a typical old piece of paper. But if you introduce any kind of digital layer to the system, if it's a pencil or if it's a tablet, either way, you get a full loop training system where you can get better over time, practicing with repetitions, both digitally and in the real world.
Yeah, so I think the potential for this is for 2D surfaces, for just drawing in 2D is huge in that you don't need a tablet or you don't need a piece of paper. The potential here is that because this thing has a pressure sensor on it, this could be used to turn any desk or 2D surface into an infinite drawing canvas. So instead of the biggest iPad you can get is 13-inch. But with this, you could use a massive desk and draw wherever you want. And people are asking...
Someone can come over to your house and not see the insane scribbles that you've got installed all over your walls if you just put on the glasses.
Yeah, you could have your conspiracies all scribbled on the wall and everyone's face circled and big steps between them.
Oh my gosh, that's terrifying. Oh my gosh. Okay,
you keep your craziness completely within your headset and your family wouldn't even know.
Yeah. All right. Just you're adding to this image of the mom walking in and finding their teenage kid's VR headset and putting it on and just gasping. We've gone full circle from the original shocked face on the original Oculus Rift to mom going into their teenage kid's room and then seeing all the stuff that they have posted up all over the walls.
Well, no longer. It can all be private now. So some people in the comments are asking how the tracking would work here. So what you have to realize is that Vision Pro can already do skeletal hand tracking as well as object tracking. And yes, the object tracking is in low update rate right now, but there are constraints here and a piece of hardware that makes this a lot easier than it sounds. So firstly, you're tracking a bright white stick that is known to be in the user's hand. So you have the hand tracking, you're looking within the region of the hand, you're looking for a bright white stick. The other thing is this has a gyroscope on board. Apple confirmed this has a gyroscope. On the iPad, you can now use this to twist it and kind of change the direction of a brush, for example, in one of the creativity tools. So not only do you have a bright white stick that you know is in the user's hand, but you have its 3-dot orientation. The other thing is a gyroscope on pretty much any consumer electronics device comes as part of an IMU, an inertial measurement unit, which is this little tiny chip that has a microscopic MEMS gyroscope and an accelerometer. It's very, very, very unusual for an IMU to come with just a gyroscope, not an accelerometer. And I would bet, maybe I'm wrong, that this thing actually does have an accelerometer in it. And if that is the case, they can do the same kind of sensor fusion that's done with VR controllers, because VR controllers heavily rely on their accelerometer for their low latency 6-dot tracking. The optical system, the IR LEDs are actually only used to kind of drift correct that over time. They're not the latency and precision sensitive part of the system. So if Apple does have even if it doesn't have an accelerometer in there, being able to have a bright white stick that has a gyroscope on it is going to be a lot easier to track. The other thing is, for 2D surfaces, you can do the dynamic calibration of the pressure sensor, right? You know it's touching a 2D surface when this pressure sensor is activated. So you combine that with the LiDAR and computer vision system, which is making a mesh of the room. And you can say, here's the surface, they're pushing it at this point for 2D. So yeah, this is, there is a lot of potential for this device. The fact that it has haptic feedback, I think, is fascinating because that's something you wouldn't really think is super necessary for an iPad, given you're directly drawing onto the surface. I'm very excited to see what Apple does with this device over time. And, $130 is not more expensive than the current second generation Apple Pencil. For Apple pricing, that's actually really not that bad. When I was watching this presentation and I heard them say, we've got a gyroscope, we've got a squeeze sensor, we've got a haptic feedback in addition to the double tap and pressure sensor on the original model, all of that coming together. And they said, I was expecting $200 or maybe even $300. At $130 for a Vision Pro accessory, this would be, a must buy. Pretty much anyone that wanted to do any creativity of any sort on a Vision Pro would get one of these things. Now, the only real technical issue, of course, is the charging, that this thing charges by magnetically attaching to an iPad Pro, but Apple could make a charger, right? You just make a little
Yeah.
charger, plugs into USB on one end, a little dock essentially that magnetically attaches onto the pencil. That's not a huge issue.
Yeah, it's almost silly. Like I can't even suggest the following scenario because the Vision Pro is priced too absurdly to like even suggest that like you could use this in an education elementary school setting to like actually have people learn how to draw. But I mean the thing that was so I reached out to the people who made the pencil app over on App Lab, and the way they outlined it, right, is the same story that I've heard out of people in Supernatural, right? If the people who are served by Supernatural the most are the people who are failed by existing gyms, and I will have Blair, I suppose, in the comments ready to fight me on this one again. But right, that there's people who don't want to go to the gym to see all those eyeballs on them and feel that pressure of going there, beginning those first steps towards fitness. That same thing can be true of almost any training or education program, period. And honestly, like drawing is one of them, right? There's plenty of people that just don't have a book and a tracing paper right in front of them to go and try to learn how to draw or shade something. And this this whole process makes it just that much easier and onboards a lot of people to something that they might not have gotten any other way.
Yeah, that is the real potential of something like this. Again, doing what technology has done for the past decades and turning expensive, sometimes complicated, and unwieldy hardware into software. The drawing experience becomes hardware. It's what the iPad has done really well. If this can be something that is done in Vision, uh, yeah, that's just going to make for a whole new use case. And the 3D aspect as well is incredible, right? The idea that that's what Sony really wants to focus on with their headset. And I think it's a huge untapped market. If you want to do something like animate a 3D character, the idea that today what you do is look on a 2D screen and kind of rotate it and use a mouse and keyboard to pan around it, compared to if you did have a headset with this kind of resolution where you can get the character rig right in front of you, you get a pencil and you precisely pick out every point of the rig and move it to create an animation, or you want to actually do 3D modeling in real time. This is it's difficult to see how in 15 to 20 years time this isn't how all 3D creation is done. It's just a matter of, until now, you got to get the right precision of input, the right resolution, the right weight and comfort for this to be comfortable for sitting in there for hours. All of these things are coming together. And yeah, I think if Apple does ship this, it would be a significant hit to Sony's ambitions in this space, because that's what Sony wanted to design around, and that's what Sony is designing around, right? They essentially looked at this market and said, with Vision Pro having no controllers, with the other devices being all designed around these, in Apple's words, clumsy hardware controllers that are basically a gamepad split in half with thumbsticks. What if we built a device that was specifically for this use case? And that's what Sony's headset's going to do. I think if Apple comes at this, Sony's going to be in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I don't know if since you've got the camera on us both right now, I'll show this. But like,
Oh,
well, it's fine. I can show this right now. But I always like seeing your reaction to stuff. But like, I did that one game which turned my left thumb into a thumbstick to a joystick, and then did my right finger as a pinch, and so the pinch became a jump button, and that was enough to get basic platformer control going left and right like this, and then pinching as I go. Well, if you imagine a pencil right in your left hand providing a lot of haptic feedback, this actually provides yourself haptic feedback, right? Your two fingers pressing together every time you do it provides a nice little like knowledge that you've pressed the button correctly. The problem with all that is, right, you've got two buttons on your mouse button, right? You've got multiple many buttons on your Quest controllers. This isn't quite enough to emulate a whole series of games and really get like this is actually getting to really interesting things. But we've seen some of these people attempting with really fine-tuned controls, even touching the pads of your fingertips against the sides of your fingers. when you start adding sensors at the wrist, like a watch or what Meta has been doing, as well as the sensor fusion from the headset, or even like something gripped in your hand, do we end up getting like I'm wondering whether like these things are destined for the landfill if they lose out to a competing system of interacting with all of these objects around us. Like, why do I go and get this instead of exactly what Meta and Apple are doing? Like, I just want to use a normal pencil or a computerized pencil.
Yeah, it's a very interesting question when you think about it. You could even argue, is even a pencil necessary at all in the 3D context? As you say, could you technically just, pinch like this and move things directly with your hand? Will that eventually move out if hand tracking becomes precise enough? Perhaps you do lose the ability to kind of get an extra level of dexterity that you're kind of hinged to an axis with a pencil. You also get lack of system driven haptics. Yes, you're right, you get self haptics. That is a haptic event. That's a haptic event. Touching my hand is a haptic event, but you can't get something like system driven haptics. So it's going to really depend on the use case. I think this will be very fascinating to watch play out, to see, do specialized input devices work like this, or is it, as you say, just going to be generic hands and stylus plus, the fact that eye tracking is guiding this along means that even if you don't have full precision hand tracking, the system can work out your intent based on the fact that you're looking somewhere slightly different than the more you're pinching. So if you do get a few frames of hand tracking that are lower quality, they can make up with that with eye tracking. And that's
Like,
something we've only really seen and done well on Vision Pro.
this is going to be a stretch to explain here, but I've been looking for the perfect accessory for the Vision Pro, and I've ended up on this thing that docks the keyboard to the trackpad. So the Apple Magic Keyboard, the Apple Magic Trackpad, they're docked side by side. And I was looking at Amazon trying to pick out which one to buy. There's also a model that puts the trackpad down below the keyboard, just like it is in a laptop layout. So it's almost like you've got a headless Mac in your lap that's set up just like a laptop. But someone pointed out to me on Twitter, I can't remember who it was, that the trackpad lacks um, the wrist rejection technology that all the laptops have today. So when you go to try to use this very same configuration as your laptop, suddenly every single time you're typing, the trackpad will be activated right in front of you. So actually, that you've got to orient it such that the trackpad goes over on the right and the keyboard goes over on the left, so you don't have that constant palm interaction thing happening. Well, that's exactly the same type of solve that helps, that if the computer vision was helping notice where your wrist is at any given moment, it can do that rejection stuff for you as well. And that's exactly the same type of thing that you're talking about with uh, any input system, right? Helping close the gap and reject poor intent. Like, one of the things that, like, people are complaining about Vision Pro being so like useless, it going into the useless pile just like the Quest does. And I can totally understand that when you don't even have the touch controllers with it that make you go and use the Quest all the time. When this simple little thing that I'm talking about, the palm rejection, makes it almost unusable to try to use a simple trackpad and keyboard in the configuration like a laptop.
Yeah, for sure. I think this is something we should really pay attention to Vision OS 2.0 in June to see if it is being announced at WWDC. To be confirmed, that's not, to be clear, that's not being confirmed. To see what Apple's approach is to bringing in more input devices. One thing that's still not supported at all in Vision OS yet is a mouse. Yes, a trackpad is supported, but you can't connect a mouse yet, which is a pretty crazy one for me. Like, you can connect a mouse to a Quest, and in the V65 update, they did some work to make that work a little bit better in terms of rejecting accidental hand tracking inputs. I think it's something that Apple will definitely focus on too. So we'll have to keep close attention. Are we ready to go
Yep.
to the final subject then?
Yep, let's get through this. I don't want to keep you too long today, and I want to keep to our original target of trying to keep this to a shorter episode. And yeah, let me know. Tell David to read out your comments. He's in command of what I can see. So I'm either driven by your tangents or my own. I'm not going to let David send me off on any tangents. I won't give him that power.
Yeah, I'll just have a look at the comments here. Mark Seymour saying it's a balance between friction and precision. I think that's very true. It is all about that balance. Grabbing a bulky controller is a high friction for most users. This is why hand tracking has been such a success. That's very true. It's all about, you have to make picking up the input device be so useful and add so much to the experience that it's better than just taking your hands, because there is something so freeing about being able to just put on a headset and without having to do any other input devices, just be able to use it. And with that, with Vision Pro's hand and eye tracking, it can almost feel like telepathy at times, right? That's what a lot of people I've demoed it to have said. That's what I thought when I originally used it. And you have to be better than that. It has to add so much that it's better than just using your mind.
It's like you've got telepathy, but nothing you want to do with it, right? Like you've got
Well,
some
not
windows
nothing.
you can move, or we've got some windows you can move around in space around you, but like the magic of Waltz of the Wizard, the Beat Saber gameplay, like all these things that we do with controllers usually aren't there on Vision Pro. There, it's literally you've got telepathy to do nothing with. You're right, not nothing, but very little.
Yeah, I think right now it's about the level of interactivity. If you're looking for a really richly interactive experience, that's not what Vision Pro is currently focused on. It currently is focused on turning screens into software. As I said in my review, it's a portable TV that is bigger than any TV you could possibly buy. It's a portable triple monitor setup that fits in your backpack. It is not yet the kind of magical experience of Quest where you feel like you're in another world interacting directly with things. That's not what Vision Pro is currently
Well,
focused on. But we know that Rec Room is coming. We know that Demio is coming. We know that Job
but
Simulator is coming, and that people are going to see how well does that work in a headset like Vision Pro with hand tracking.
I have yet to get my family up and running in Crossy Road Castle, but it's all there, right? The same exact experience. So with Crossy Road Castle, that same thing I was talking about earlier, I could hold my thumb up like this, I could pinch together to do jumps like this, and I can give my family code to get in and play 4-player multiplayer on other sides of this castle, and we race and go through the castle together, exactly like Demio and exactly like the others. But
I'm gonna have to strongly disagree that it's exactly like the others. You're
no, it's
talking
not
about
exact.
something that exists in a rectangle in front of you. Yes, it's 3D, but you're not in another world. This is a floating 3D application in front of you. It's not like Job Simulator. It's not like Rec Room.
Yeah, fair. All right, fair. Yeah, we are still in open debate over what terminology to use when what more than 50% of your environment is virtual content, less than 50% of your like the
Well,
object in front of you is virtual, but what if the table is virtual, but the object on like what if the table is real, but the object on top of it is virtual and nothing else is virtual? It's
well,
just a
sure.
virtual object
Yeah, that's a tabletop game for sure, but and it's representing
in
a miniature
AR in
world.
a VR
Yeah.
headset. I hate it.
Well, you're the one that wants to always call them VR headsets. I don't agree with calling them
Yeah,
VR
he just calls
headsets.
them headsets, and I
Yeah,
agree
they're
with that too.
headsets,
That
right?
makes sense.
You
Yeah,
can
they're
do
all
VR in them.
headsets.
You can do mixed reality. They're headsets,
What's the
right? But
Magic Leap? What kind of headset is Magic Leap, David?
you would call that because it can't do VR. You would call that an AR headset. You can't put you in a fully virtual environment. It can't do fully VR, so it just augments your reality. It's not even. In fact, it can't even replace pixels. It can only add pixels. It's an additive display system. So that's AR. But this is a huge debate. What is the difference between AR and VR? Let's
Sorry,
not do
last
that
subject,
today.
David. Go back to the last
Yeah, what
subject.
happened to this? What happened to tangents not happening? There was one comment I really wanted to call out here because it is a little bit off topic, but it's we don't need to discuss it, but it's very very interesting, and it's from Rudel Zavedno. I'm really sorry if I've mispronounced your name. And they said, "I'd love to have joystick plus hand tracking objects for clickable cockpits in Sims. Why is no one working on that?" That's so true. Why can't you have a HOTAS and hand tracking so that you can click the virtual buttons but then use a physical stick? The real answer to this is because no PC native headset that is widely used supports controller free hand tracking. So every game that's built for PC, which is where there's enough horsepower to do these simulators, is built around the assumption that you're using controllers. Now, with OpenXR supporting hand tracking, with Quest 3 being able to pass through its hand tracking to your PC via either virtual desktop or Quest Link, there are more developers looking into this, but it's still one of those things where like a Valve Index user can't do this. The Valve Index doesn't have controller-free hand tracking, nor can a HTC Vive user, nor can a Rift S user, nor can an original Rift user. This is only something that's usable in these hybrid standalone headsets. So it's just a matter of time until enough headsets support this, and it's something that developers focus on. But I completely with you on
Honestly,
that one.
well, like David, I'm almost. This is one of the, we don't want to go off on this tangent, but how do old games go to support new accessories is going to be a real pain point over the coming years, right? Like if the model wins out where skeletal hand tracking with the controllers in each hand on top wins out, there's a lot of old games that have to be routed through the new system. And there's of course big wins like how do you sync up the location of the stick, the wheel that you're using, the pedals that you're using to the game elements from that simulator you love from 2019. Like it's not, you're going to have an update.
Yeah, the developer has to do that realistically. With OpenXR, you can do a lot around how you abstract hand tracking, but when it comes to something like that, it's going to need to be a developer feature. Something you could do, for example, is calibrate the position of the virtual wheel in a racing simulator by waiting until you see this pose from hand tracking for a long time, right? If the system notices that the user is doing this based on hand tracking and you're getting wheel
David
input,
just drove off. I saw you drive off. Okay.
Yeah, you can easily figure that out. But yeah, this is a very interesting topic, and we plan to publish some articles about things like this at some point. So keep an eye on us over the next month. This is something we are thinking about a lot too, and hopefully a lot of industry developers are as well. But let's get straight on to that final subject today, because we don't have as much time today as we mentioned. It's just a report from a Chinese news outlet, Wall Street CN, and they are citing the supply chain as saying that Apple is accelerating the launch of the cheaper non-Pro Vision headset from an original plan of September 2025 to a new plan of June 2025. So only 13 months from now, for a headset that, according to this report, would be roughly 400 grams compared to the Vision Pro's 650 grams. And it also claims, and this is an extraordinary claim, that the supply chain is preparing for scale at the level of tens of millions. Now, I think that sounds like bullshit personally, because the current Vision Pro is produced at the scale of hundreds of thousands. If this report had said that the cheaper and lighter headset is going to be prepared at the scale of millions, sure. But tens of millions, 2 orders of magnitude leap in just 1 year, it seems remarkably unlikely. And the reason for that is that what's needed for Apple to deliver headsets that are much cheaper and mass producible on larger scale is the micro OLED supply chain to expand greatly. Right now, the current Vision Pro is only using Sony, and Sony can reportedly only make 1 million micro OLED displays per year. So given that headsets need 2 each, that means that Apple can only make around 500,000 of these things. And that's why the Vision Pro is $3,500, because there's no point in pricing a supply constrained product low, because it's just going to sell out instantly, and then you're not making the money you could make. Sony is apparently charging $350 per display, so $700 per headset. Apple, according to a report from The Information last year, has been talking to 2 Chinese suppliers, BOE, which is one of the biggest display companies in the world, as well as Sia Technology, which is a smaller company that currently makes the 2.5K micro OLED display in the big screen beyond. And so if the optimistic scenario here is that BOE and Sia and maybe some others are able to start mass producing micro OLED displays by next year and bring the price down significantly from something like $350 to maybe, I don't know, $100 per display. And then using those new displays, Apple can release this cheaper non-Pro Vision headset at maybe $1,500 or $2,000 and sell millions instead of hundreds of thousands. Tens of millions to me sounds like nonsense, but I could easily see millions happening if the micro OLED supply chain expands enough.
Yeah, all right. And then I think I've got kind of a missing piece here, a theory to suggest for you, David. And I think I might have alluded to this before. And I guess I'll just put out there I don't have inside information, even though I am married to an Apple employee. Uh, I don't know anything here about Apple's product plans whatsoever. It's so before I go into this moment of conjecture here, I wanted to just lay that out there that like I don't know, but like dropping price on the current Vision Pro is something you seem to think isn't going to happen, and there is a historical precedent for it. I think in the original iPhone to drop the price significantly after initial uptake.
Yeah, the reason I don't think it's possible is because from what we know from looking at BOE's product plans, their micro displays are going to be slightly differently sized and different resolution. So it's not a matter of being able to just swap in new suppliers. This headset is designed around those Sony micro OLED displays, right? It would be a different headset. I think what they're going to do is essentially deprecate this thing when the new one comes out. Like, sure, it will probably be a downgrade in some ways, like because they want to reach a cheaper price point. But if you look at the original iPhone as your interesting analogy, the next iPhone was a downgrade in some ways. They went from, I believe, an aluminium chassis to a plastic chassis, and they cut some other kind of build quality things to get the price down in the next version of the iPhone. So I think that's very possible that Apple will do this, and then they're because right now, right, the biggest problems with this thing, the Vision Pro, is it's too heavy and it's too expensive. And you can't magically fix that in the same product, but what you can do is come out with a product that is cheaper and lighter. And I'm sure they are also working on a high-end Vision Pro 2, as Mark Gurman from Bloomberg has reported they're working on for 2026. But if you look at what it would be your priority right now at Apple, you have this new platform, Vision OS. The only headset you have that can run it is $3,500 freaking dollars. Who cares about the high end for now? Let's just get this to be something that anyone can actually remotely afford. A very interesting question from a commenter here is a few commenters are actually asking. David Stewart says, would Apple ever consider not using micro OLED? Wabo said, couldn't it be that the cheaper Vision HND uses LCD or another form of LCD or a large OLED panel? So the problem with this is that micro OLED is much more pixel dense than LCD. So to get these kind of just over 1-inch panels that can do 4K resolution, you can only do that with micro OLED. So if Apple wanted to use LCD, they would have two choices. To make a 4K OLED, a 4K LCD panel would have to be much bigger than a 4K micro OLED panel. So they could use a 4K LCD panel, but make the headset much bulkier. Not necessarily heavier, just physically larger, because you have to have a larger panel and a larger gap between the lens and the panel. That's one possibility. That seems very un-Apple-like, though. The idea that Vision Pro is already considered to be quite bulky by people, the idea that they would actually make something that would start to resemble like a Pico 4 in terms of bulk more than a Vision Pro seems very, very unlikely to me.
When they could go the other way, if they choose to drop the external display system.
Yes, if they take away stuff like eyesight, and maybe use cheaper materials that are actually better from a weight perspective, they could actually get something that's not only lighter but thinner. The other thing they could do is use panels that are the same size that are LCD but use lower resolution, right? They could technically come out with a LCD panel that was like 2K per eye and in the same form factor. But that also seems very, very un-Apple-like, because I think with Vision Pro, they've set this precedent that what you get on Vision OS is this amazing cinema, this amazing monitor that can, has the resolution to do these things for the first time. Not like Quest Pro, where Meta said, oh, it's a virtual monitor, and then you put it on and it's like, this is terrible. It's so low resolution. Why would you sell a $1,500 headset designed to replace monitors with sub 2K panels? Apple, I don't think will do that, because this Vision Pro today is the minimum quality bar. I strongly believe that Apple believes that micro OLED displays are the minimum viable component for good headsets.
I think there's a very good argument there to be made, and I think if you go historically back into our chart here of those headsets that had OLED in them, the ones that had the staying power the longest are OLEDs. I would be willing to bet. And it's like saying, if you go over the whole story of Meta's evolution from Facebook to uh, from the Rift onward, right? Every single headset after the Rift is a study in compromises, right? The Rift S loses IPD adjustment, Oculus Go drops controllers, Quest brings back some of this, but it forces it all into the standalone form factor. And then you've got, again, more optimization for price. You've got Quest 2 and Quest 3, where Quest 3 is this thing that's $500 with the next gen processor, with standalone controller, controller tracking and hand tracking, but it's still sacrificing some things, right? It's still not this full vision.
Yeah, I think with Quest 3 was the first headset in a very long time that wasn't designed to be the cheapest thing as possible, right? I do think Quest 3 was a bit of a different strategy there, and that's why we're going to see that Quest 3 Lite or S that actually does do that. But it's still, one of the biggest examples is it still comes with this flimsy head strap that is for a lot of people just not good enough. The Elite strap is considered essentially a necessity for Quest headsets, even with Quest 3 for a lot of people's head shapes. Apple Vision Pro, ironically, has the same problem, except they actually include a better strap in the box,
It,
for completely different reasons. Um, but yeah, you're right to say that what Apple has done with Vision Pro is built something that there's not a compromise there. You don't look at anything in Vision Pro and gone, well, they've done this to cut costs, or they've done this because they don't want to push this hard yet. It's just that to get there, that they've made this 650-gram monstrosity that cost
yeah.
$3,500.
And again, I'm remembering that there was the Vader helmet from Valve that was quietly alluded to that did a whole lot more than what actually shipped with. And we know that Meta executives have even suggested that, right, we could have done something that threw everything in it, and we've just made hard choices not to. But like, I guess where I'm going with this, David, is any headset, like, you could make the argument that any headset manufacturer that chooses not to go with OLED, forget resolution, they're choosing to give their users a gray, murky sky at night in the headset, right?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I haven't even talked about what you rightly point out is the huge problem with LCD is that it's just the contrast is terrible. And that doesn't, to some people, that doesn't matter in a TV. To most people, it does matter in a phone because you get dark mode and you can have this kind of, it almost looks like it's just the white text is just etched on to an off display. For some people, that doesn't matter for a TV or a tablet. But when you're in a headset and you have this, 100-degree field of view magnified over you, and you're in, you see that darkness as this murky gray that encapsulates you. It really does matter, right? There was a huge loss from Quest 1 to Quest 2 in losing OLED blacks. There absolutely was. You can argue it's the Carmackian net win of, much higher refresh rate from 72 to 120 and much sharper text resolution because you're higher resolution and RGB pixels from Quest 1 to Quest 2. But there is still that loss, right? And when I'm playing anything that is in space, as you point out rightly, in a Quest 3, I'm still sitting here thinking, this kind of sucks because that's not black. That's not actually dark. It's a murky gray. And one of the things that it just strikes you at first when you get into a Vision Pro isn't just the resolution. As you say, it's when you're in a dark scene, it's dark. It's really, really dark. And you can also have the brightest of brights over there and the darkest of dark over there. And that's something that obviously Apple today has really talked up in their iPad Pro line. They finally brought OLED to the iPad Pro, and it's being talked about as they're the best display ever, and they've talked about the advantages of that. And it does matter. And maybe some of Zuckerberg strongly hinted that at least one of the Horizon OS headsets from third parties is going to do this. So people within Meta's ecosystem will be able to get this, but not through the Quest.
Well, yep. I'm glad you got there, right? It's exactly where I was kind of going. So that goes full circle, I think, to the original question. I think that really kind of, when you're asking this question, you're asking, is that Apple's model to remove this from some of their customers, or are they going to remove something else from some of their customers? Because, this is going to be Meta's model, right? They've granted they've granted off True Black, Night, Sun, great space flight. They've granted great space flight to certain manufacturing partners and not others.
Yeah, and I mean, to be fair, this is a cost issue in many ways, right? Like we keep saying it, these micro OLED displays are so difficult to produce and so expensive. And one of the big issues with cost is the yield, right? It's there are a bunch of these micro OLED displays coming out of factories, Thea's for big screen beyond, Sony's for Vision Pro, that are just one pixel is not working, right? One pixel, and they have to bin the whole thing, right? Like that's how bad this is. What happened with smartphones and with other small devices like tablets is that relatively high density LCDs became something that were essentially perfected, not only perfected in quality, but then perfected in manufacturing, and the cost comes down. And today, you can build a product with an LCD panel for an absurdly low cost from one of the Chinese display manufacturers. Eventually, we're going to get there for headsets, right? There will be some day where we're sitting here and this sounds like we're talking about a horse and cart. It sounds like archaic. We're like, what are you talking about? Any headset company can get micro OLED displays for $20 each now. That's going to happen one day. It's not like it's not like there's a law of physics that's stopping this. It's just that we're in the very, very early days of this supply chain.
And it's funny. It is very much like OLED has already been this luxury that very few people can afford, right? It's already been this thing that if you want to go get a TV that is going to wow the people who come to visit, you go get an OLED, and then you've got at the other end of things, right? All this content that you would, like one of the things that happened today was Apple announced that one of their a major name director is viewing and doing all of their editing inside the Vision Pro. Well, they're going to be doing all of their editing on an OLED display and viewing their work as intended on an OLED display. How does that look on any other display system? Is not, the director themselves is going to be viewing it on a very different system than you are going to see it at home.
Yeah, I mean, for any of these headsets to be usable for that kind of content creation is going to need displays that are much better than what we see in any headset. Even with the Vision Pro, right? The color gamut is not huge. It's not actually up there for what you would get in a professional display system. We're still going to have to see slightly different. There's multiple different manufacturing processes for micro OLED. One that you use like a white overlay to get brightness, and then other where you have like a true RGB. There's slight differences. We're going to see this improve. It's not just the cost that's going to come down; the quality is going to improve as well. And one of the key things you'll be able to do there is get displays that are much brighter as well, because we're still in this era where these pancake lenses are killing most of the brightness, and these displays are going to have to work really, really hard right now to get through there. But there are advancements coming to micro OLED that will make that a lot better.
Any comments to respond to before we get to wrapping up here?
Yeah, Onakazi just saying maybe because they went through the times when LCD black was noticeably gray and today's bad displays are way better. I think, that's referencing an earlier comment where they say that, they don't consider LCD that bad. I think when it's, I guess if you see, obviously LCDs used to be horrible for this, right? It used to just be like a bright gray almost that black was, and it gets better and better over time, but it's still never quite there. It's still...
Yeah, like to David's point, a single pixel on this thing, right? Like you can handle one of your backlights going out in the corner of your TV. You can stare at that stupid little darker area of your TV for a good 6-9 months and not go out and get a new TV. But if that's in the corner of your field of vision during every single thing you do in VR, you're gonna get sick and hate your headset. Like that's the difference. So like you can't. The quality bar is just not the same in multiple avenues for what is minimum quality here. Sorry, David, what happened to you there?
Oh, I was just muted. Yeah, I think it's that really is the question here, is what Apple's headset is going to be to wrap this up. Like, where do they consider the minimum quality? I did see a comment of people when they were asking about LCD saying maybe this is the minimum quality for the Vision Pro line, and Apple will actually release something lower quality for the Vision line. I don't think that's the case when it comes to display, because Vision is right in the name. This is about what is the quality of visuals you see. And even the Vision Pro that we're talking about with these near 4K OLED micro displays, that's still nowhere near human retinal resolution, right? We're still talking about needing a resolution of double that to get to what the human eye can fully discern. So this idea that Apple will go lower than that, it just doesn't scratch me. I think, to summarize what they're going to cut, if I had to guess, in this Vision headset or Vision Air or whatever they call it, the eyesight display is probably going to go. The M2 chip is probably going to be replaced by an A series chip, the iPhone series chip, probably the A18 Pro that will also be in the iPhone 16 Pro. I would strongly bet, and then cheaper material. So instead of this great looking but ridiculous from a cost and weight perspective, aluminium and glass, we're going to see plastic and plastic. The good old fashioned plastic that is in all of these other headsets.
Do it in transparent colors, and you'll sell them in the millions. You bring back the Bondi Blue Vision headset, and I think you'll sell a few.
Yeah, I think something that other people have suggested that I think is pretty likely is that it doesn't have audio pods. Apple might just say you have to use AirPods with this. And if you're someone who's willing to spend, let's say $1,500 or $2,000 or whatever this ends up being priced at for an Apple product, you're probably the kind of person who's already in the Apple ecosystem and willing to, buy AirPods if you don't already have them.
So wait, are you suggesting it's going to have a headphone jack?
No, AirPods, like wireless.
No, I get it, but that would be that. I'm trying to imagine that, like, there's already no port on the device, right? Like, there's already, like, you can get an adapter for a USB-C iPhone to bring back the headphone port. Right. I'm not going to attach that little dongle to the USB-C port of my battery pack, and if I do that, if I end up doing that, I'm going to be real upset at somebody when I do that one day. If I get the little USB-C to headphone dongle into the battery port of the Vision Pro, and that's how I can't imagine a headset without any audio built in whatsoever.
Well, I mean, I think that's very possible for Apple, right? Like, if it's they are trying to get this thing down in cost. People already own AirPods. If you're in the Apple ecosystem, you probably own AirPods, right? If you're in the Apple ecosystem to the point you're willing to spend $1,500 to $2,000 on an Apple product, you probably already own AirPods. AirPods they're the highest selling audio device in the world by far.
What about, like, there's also the weight loss issue, right? Like, do we lose the battery pack in that generation? Does it still have a battery pack? If you don't have to do all the processing for personas, right? Like, what is the weight loss if you don't also care about doing any persona processing? Like, do you get anything back by doing that?
You still going to do personas when it comes to
decoding,
being able to do facial FaceTime calls. Yeah. You're not going to render it on the front, but it's not going to have a massive impact. I think the fact you're using an A series chip instead of an M series chip would probably reduce battery draw. The question is, could they actually get rid of the external battery and do something like replace the part of the headset that right now has those audio pods and put like two batteries there? Yeah. So the batteries are actually on the side of the headset. That's a solution that really hasn't been explored yet, right? Put the battery on the side of the headset. A lot of people's first response to talking about the battery is always put it on the back. All the enthusiasts, the VR enthusiasts, is just put it on the back. But how do you lean back on a bed or a chair or like a sofa? Have you ever tried this with like a Pico 4 or Quest Pro? It just doesn't work when you're actually leaning back. What happens is you push back and then the headset is then pivoting around the battery pack, and it's one of the most uncomfortable experiences as the whole thing shoves forward.
Did you just do a model of laying in bed?
Yeah, I just did it. I just pushed my head back into and it's awful. It's true. It's really a terrible experience. So that's why Apple chose to put the battery. One of the reasons Apple chose to put the battery externally. But you could imagine a headband that incorporates the battery all the way on the sides in a solution. I think that's the kind of creative solution we could see from Apple. Even with Meta, we saw like that curved battery in the Quest Pro's rear padding. That's something that very few products had used before. So if you imagine something that is curved and slim and distributed around the headset, it's possible. It's maybe what we'll see. Again, we are in the realm of utter speculation here, folks, to be crystal clear. None of this is based on anything concrete. Maybe what you could see would be that the Vision Pro line always has the external battery, so you can always power this high-end M series chip and do the highest end processing, whereas the Vision Air or the whatever you
it
call it
fits.
line has the
It,
battery built onto the headset, so that you have this low friction approach that Quest has, where instead of the thing I hate most about the Vision Pro is the battery, right? Like
yeah,
I hate the fact. I think you agree, and a lot of people agree that I hate the fact that I have to. I grab my Quest Thread, put it on my head, and I'm in, right?
yeah.
Like mine is sitting on a charging dock all the time. I understand some people don't charge theirs, okay, but I do. Mine's sitting on a charging dock. I put it on my head, and I'm in. When I take my Vision Pro, I attach the battery, I wait for it to boot, I put the battery in my pocket, or, if I'm sitting somewhere, I kind of put it to my side. If I have to stand up, I have to put it here. Sometimes I snag the battery and pull the whole thing to the side.
It's
It
it's
just,
funny.
it's
Your
terrible.
description, yeah, no, you're 100%. But your description there of attaching the battery, right? I don't ever disconnect the battery, even though I should, right? I
I
felt the
tried
push
that.
and pull.
I
I
tried
felt
that,
the
and then
push
the
and
thing
pull.
won't turn on.
No, I get, yeah, no, I get that. Yeah, yeah. I've had stupid. What I'll do is I'll transport the thing as a unit, right? And then I'll put the thing on and go, what the? And then disconnect it on the back of my head, reconnect it, and then wait the 15 seconds for it to turn on. And yeah, like I could put it in a nice little bag, like a protective bag, on its own, and then store the battery separate. But I never want that other situation where where's the battery? I've got the headset here in one hand and not the battery in the other. That's stupid too, to have that situation. And like, yeah, it is this horrendous thing. I love that solution. It is a really, really elegant idea to think about it. I think my joke, or like the thing I kept laughing about, is as long if they put the batteries on the side like that, as long as the USB-C port accepts a dongle that will let you put in regular 3.5 millimeter headphones and still get
We're talking
battery to
about
the headset.
Apple. It's not going to have a 3.5 millimeter headphone jack.
Do it. Do it, you cowards. All right.
I
That's the
mean,
end
if
of
you look at the market as well, like the number of people who want 3.5 millimeter, they are the loud minority. If you look at what people actually buy, it's wireless. People buy wireless headphones. Like walk out on the street, what are people using? They're using
I'm
wireless
in New
headphones.
York and I'm seeing the full range. It's wild. Yeah, and at the lowest end, the people who don't have any money, they're letting you hear their music, right? Like you're hearing blasting music, and then right
I
above that, you have wired headphones.
I remember that in LA. See, that's not something I've ever encountered in the UK. Is someone playing music out of their phone as they walk along? That's something I saw in LA, and I
Well,
was
it's nice. It's nice to get those vibes sometimes from a boombox going down the street, or a portable Bluetooth speaker. But like, you've got the full gamut there of private audio via wired headphones being available in every corner store in the world. And then, yeah, right above that, you could get the shittiest Bluetooth headphones imaginable that are going to short out on you after 20 minutes, or, you're going to hear shitty little interference on the Bluetooth headphones. And then you go up on there to the name brands with trusted Bluetooth networking
I
chips
mean,
inside of them.
I think in 2024 you would be surprised by how good budget Bluetooth headphones are now from something like Amazon. You would be genuinely surprised how good they are. And when you go to the mid-range, right? Obviously AirPods are in like the $150, $200 plus market. If you go like to the mid-range, there are a lot of really good options at like $70 to $80, for example, that people can get and then use for a very, very long time. And yeah, if you look at the sales statistics, like people, like this is very clear. People are buying wireless headphones. That's what they're choosing.
Mm. Yeah, I still think there's the use for the 3.5 millimeter port. I'm going to defend it. I've still got it on my Game Boy from the 1980s, and I'm going to defend the Android users here. This is the one. This is the one, David, that
So
I defend the Android users on.
I mean, look, I'm not talking about whether I think it's a good idea, right? If I was building this headset, sure, I'll give you a 3.5 millimeter headset or
All right.
headphone jack. I'm just saying Apple isn't going to do it,
I
right?
don't I don't want
One
it
of the
on the
key,
device. I want it on a dongle that I connect to the device, David.
they're still not going to do it. It's not what they're going to do. And one of the things they did with Vision Pro that not many people seem to know, is that they give lossless audio in wireless for the first ever time, right? There is no other Apple product that can do lossless wireless audio than Vision Pro with the new AirPods Pro. That's that lossless audio codec that they came up with
No,
for this. Only Vision Pro.
no.
Now, arguably, the engineering reason for that is because it's right beside it. Right, the distance you're actually traveling is like a couple of centimeters. If you're wearing a headset and headphones, you don't have to have a very high power signal, but you can have a very high bandwidth signal that goes a very, very short distance, and that seems to be what they pulled off. So it's possible that we'll get even cheaper headphones that are designed just for headsets in future, because it doesn't have to go over a distance. It goes
Uh,
from the top of your head to the side of your head, and that's it.
Yeah, that's a very, very good point. And I love that way to leave off on this conversation, because I think that's what the debate is going to be for David and I here on out. We're discussing now what are the best accessories for your VR experience across Vision Pro, across MetaQuest, across PC VR, right? There's actually, we're already using them. Like, we were using these keyboards that connect to multiple devices internally, the Logitech keyboards. I've got one, he's got one, and it's been a fundamental part of being able to use these headsets on an ongoing basis. But it's not purpose built for use with these headsets just yet. And the very first devices that we've seen for them were all pretty crummy. But I think that's because they weren't built for this type of modern virtual reality AR based operating systems, and we're going to be faced with a lot of really cool accessories, I think, in this next year. So I think we're going to have to put a 3.5 millimeter port on the Apple Vision headset on your bingo card, because I'm not gonna stop. I think selling a headset that does not connect to audio unless you're using an Apple product is a stupid idea, and that should never happen.
It may be, but it's exactly the kind of thing Apple would do.
All right. Well, on that note, let's end this show. Thank you all for tuning in. It's been fun. A lot of animated conversation here between David and I. Thank you all for the comments. We'll see you in the future.
Thanks so much, everyone. We'll see you next week. Well, we actually will not see you next week at the regular time, because it is Google I/O. Next week is Google I/O, where they may potentially announce Android XR or tease it. And so we'll be watching that.
Ooh.
We'll bring you updates either later in the week or early next week as to exactly what we're going to do around the show. But I think you'd understand we don't want to be in here if Google announces a gigantic AR platform. We have a super chat here from Mark Seymour saying, love the commitment, doubling your original 45-minute estimated showtime. Great show as always. Thank you so much for the £5 super chat. Yeah, that was not our intention to go twice the amount, but we love discussing this stuff with you. Even if that means a longer workday, it doesn't matter. It's really interesting to discuss this. And thank you so much, everyone. Please keep an eye on the UploadVR website tomorrow for an interesting announcement.
All right. Yeah. We'll see you in the future. Thank you.